Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played and I rank and review them in order of preference. Now before I get started on these 5 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Lusitania. Now this is a small box card game where you are trying to build up this army of soldiers and try to equip them with their relevant shields and swords and horses, and race to get to a certain amount of points before your opponent reaches that target. Now essentially it is a drafting style game where you're managing this hand of cards, swapping them with ones in this communal pile, wiping them off, using some special abilities that are fairly basic, and obviously play cards of a certain suit down. Once you're committed to a certain suit or colour of soldier, then you're committed to that. You're going to look out all the other players to play that certain suit of cards, but obviously you are on the search for those particular cards. Your opponents know that, you know what your opponent wants, and so on. It's very luck dependent, and to be honest, I was very disappointed by this game. I thought it was a bit of a mess. I thought it was it could constantly just leave you in stalemate situations where you do not want any of the cards. You're just swapping card that you don't want with a card that you don't want until you get a particular card that lets you wipe the display. It was very poorly put together, I think, and ultimately I just, by the time it got to halfway through the game, I just thought, let's just get this over with, just say that we've played it. So I definitely would not recommend this one to anybody. It's just a pure luck fest, and it doesn't really have any interesting mechanisms at all. And yeah, definitely a big dud for me. So let's call it there. That is Lusitania at number 5. At number 4, I have Blue Moon Legends. And it was very difficult to put this one in a kind of a ranking order, because this is a very well designed and clever game. But the reason it's low on the list is because I'm pretty sure this game isn't right for me. So this is a kind of Reiner Knizia's take on a kind of a fantasy dueling system where you have preset decks of cards, which I do like. I love having those preset arranged decks of cards rather than having to deck build myself. And then you are basically playing these cards out. These cards have 2 strength values on them, either fire or earth. And you can also kind of bolster your strength by playing these additional booster or support cards to try and manipulate the board state to keep kind of head-to-head or eye-to-eye with your opponent, because you always want to be playing cards to at least match the level of your opponent. And if you can't, you're going to lose the round and then gain access over these dragons, which work in this kind of tug-of-war system. And you're trying to get access over all 3 of these dragons and then score another point as if you were to gain a 4th. So actually, it's very simple mechanically. It is broken down into quite a few phases, which, to be honest, most of the time you can ignore those phases. And there are certainly nuances in the way that these cards interact with each other. Some of them are a bit more obvious on how you should play them at face value, and some of them are a little bit more sneaky, a little bit more, have a few more tricks up their sleeve and a bit more difficult to play and to master. Now, I did play through quite a few decks of these cards to see the differences, and yeah, I can safely say that while I like the way the game works and I like that potential of how the cards interact with each other, I just found that the gameplay wasn't right for me, because I think this is one of those games that's going to favour a player who prefers to deep dive into games to get the most out of these cards and to really find those synergies between those cards. Where for me, if I'm going to play a game like this, I'm going to dip in and out, maybe sometimes leaving months in the spaces between playing it, and I don't think that's going to be the way you're going to get the most from this game. So I can certainly see why players who like these dueling style games would get a lot from this, but still it's not right for my collection at all. I just know I'm not going to go back and revisit it and try all of that content in the box. So still, objectively, a very good game, but personally, certainly not right for me. So that is Blue Moon Legends at number 4. At number 3, I have Kodama Forest. This is a polyomino style game where you are working with each of your neighbours. So it has that between 2 cities mechanism, where you are going to score for your right board and your left board, and you're trying to score as few points as possible, because each round you are drawing a certain amount of tiles, and you're going to place one of these tiles on the right board and one on the left board, but you can discuss with your neighbours how to optimally place these. So on these boards there are spaces that have 5 and 10s written on them, which are positive points which you don't want. Of course, you want to cover up as many 5s and 10s as you possibly can. And there's also kind of preset Kodama spaces which you cannot overlap. And there are also on the tiles kind of halves of these different features. So for example, there are these like bamboo gardens, and if you and your opponent combine them with each other, or you and yourself on future turns, then you get to place additional pieces such as these big pandas that can cover up a lot of space. So it's all about trying to keep both sides balanced so that you don't fall too far behind and make one of your boards drag down the other one. But of course, all the other players are trying to do that and try to keep a passive view on what the other players are doing, so that they have the lead in terms of scoring the fewest amount of points. Now, after reading the rulebook, I thought this game would be far too basic, and I thought the placement rules would be far too lenient, where in reality that board quickly does fill up because the tiles are fairly big and those Kodamas are placed in very inconvenient places to stop you placing on top of them. But as a twist on the simple polyomino mechanism, this one worked well. The idea of communicating with your neighbours to optimally place them was really quite interesting. And as a concept, I've seen that between two cities mechanism work really well, and I've seen it fall completely flat. And this one, I would say it worked pretty damn well. So that is Kodama Forest at number 3. At number 2, I have Mariposas. So this is a pretty interesting game about these butterflies and trying to move around this large map, collecting resources in order to breed more butterflies. I'm trying to achieve goals as you go through the game through these objective cards. But the feature I did like the most is that kind of butting of the heads between those in-game goals with that end-game goal of trying to fully upgrade your butterflies and make it back to the start point in order to score almost like a set collection bonus. The more you get back home, the more points you will get. So the game is card driven, where all times in the game you'll have 2 cards in your hand with the potential to get some bonus booster cards. And these cards will dictate how far you can move your butterflies and also how many resources you can collect. Now, actually, I think the game works very well mechanically. It's a pretty smooth game. I think some things are somewhat tacked on through this kind of card set collection, but I really did like the simplicity and elegance of the game. I suppose my only nitpick would be that I think the card draw is a little bit too restrictive. Only having 2 cards in your hand didn't feel like you had enough options at all times. I would have liked to have seen maybe 3 cards in your hand, just to slightly alleviate that. I suppose you could house rule that. But all in all, I thought it worked very well. Again, I love that kind of conflict of how far do I venture out and am I going to leave myself enough time to make it back to the beginning? How am I going to most efficiently play these cards to get the exact right resources I need, not only to upgrade my butterflies, but also to match those with the objectives? Do I hold on to these resources, score the objective and then cash them in, or do I get my butterflies upgraded now because they need to be in very particular specific places in order to upgrade them or to breed new ones? So yeah, all of these different moving parts butt heads with each other, which creates interesting choices, and I really do like that. And despite having a lot of options at all times, the game didn't feel overwhelming, and it still felt pretty chill and pretty smooth, and a relaxing experience in spite of having all those options. So a very nice looking game, a nice approachable theme, and all in all, I can see why this one did quite well. So yeah, I've not really got anything negative to say about it, apart from maybe, again, that maybe having an extra card in your hand would be useful. But other than that, it was certainly a pleasant experience. So that is Mariposas at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Eco. Now, this is a Japanese card game that was printed in English a long time ago, I believe, but it's long out of print now. And this one has some really cool features that I could see being hugely successful if this game was only more widely accessible. So it's kind of a hand management style game where you have a hand of cards made up of these different kind of, rubbish essentially, or, trash. And you are trying to recycle these trash cards by playing them on these different kind of columns. And then once one of these columns has at least 4 cards of the same trash type on it, then you will pick up the next kind of scoring card. The scoring is quite interesting because each time you play a set of the cards going above the 4 of the same trash type, then the points you'll get will increase as you go. So you don't want to leave your opponents too many opportunities. But kind of halfway through the game, one of the cards is negative, so you want to try to avoid taking that one. But the interesting twist on this game is that when you play any amount of cards on one of these stacks, then you will pick up kind of one of these random cards that have been deposited there from the deck and add that into your hand. And if you ever go above 5 cards, I believe, in your hand, then you will be giving those cards, or playing those cards in front of you as negative points. So it's all about trying to very finely balance how many cards you're playing with how many cards you're picking up. And the more cards that are played in front of these recycling plants, or these columns, without scoring, the more cards are going to build up in the collection zone, where you're going to be adding more cards into your hand. So it can become very painful at times when you're forced to pick up these cards that you definitely do not want. Sometimes you're going to be overplaying cards so that you don't have, or so you can thin out your hand essentially. And just those extra little twists, trying to manage your hand of cards to keep it below 5 or 5 or below. Knowing when to hold on to cards, when to play them, and so on. It's just a very interesting, smooth little card game that's a lot of fun to play. Sometimes can be a little bit frustrating, but in a good way. And all in all, this has a lot of kind of hallmarks of what would be a widely successful game, in my opinion, because anyone can pick this up and play it and have fun with it, but it still has some interesting decisions to be made. Now, the version I have is called RECO Plus. It does come with 2 variants on the game. I've played the one I've just explained, which I believe is the original. I've not played the new one yet, so I've not made up my mind on that one. But based purely on the original RECO game, this is right up my alley in terms of the card games that I enjoy, and this one is certainly going to be staying in my collection for the foreseeable. So I put this just below a recommendation for now, only because I've not played it very much at all, and I'm pretty sure with repeated plays this is going to go up into a commendation, so I'm pretty sure of that. So that is RECO. Definitely pick this one up if you have access to Japanese games and you like your card games, hand management games. This one's quirky but still quite familiar. So that is RECO at number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the video. Definitely a mixed bag of games here. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.